Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. You turn on the news at night, probably just about any time you turn it on, you're going to see disasters somewhere in the world, problems somewhere in the world. And it's going to spark a question that's probably as old as time itself and never quite gets completely answered. And the question that gets sparked is, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good people suffer the bad things in this world? I don't know that I have an answer for you on that. I do have a guy that asked the question. The prophet Habakkuk. Another book you probably don't read very much. Habakkuk probably lives right before the ascendancy of Babylon as a world power. Maybe 10 or 12 years before the first time that Babylon attacks Jerusalem, surrounds it, and takes some captives away, 597. Habakkuk looks at the society around him, realizes that the society around him in Judah is a mess, that the wealthy are oppressing the poor, the evil are oppressing the righteous, and he looks to God in Habakkuk chapter 1, and he says, God, how long will you let this go on? How long will you let the righteous be oppressed by the wicked? And Habakkuk gets an answer from God. God says in verse 5, in answer to his question, look among the nations and see, wonder and be astounded, for I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told. For I am rousing the Chaldeans, or the Babylonians, that bitter and hasty nation, who march through the breadth of the earth to seize habitations not their own. In other words, Habakkuk, I'm going to give you an answer, but it's probably not going to be anything like you anticipated. You aren't going to believe it. Yeah, I'm going to deal with the problem here. I'm going to deal with the problem of the righteous being oppressed by the wicked. What I'm going to do is raise up an even more evil nation to discipline this nation. I'm going to bring on the Babylonians. Well, that sets Habakkuk back just a bit. And in this dialogue that takes place in the first two chapters of the book, he challenges God. And in verses 12 through 17, he in effect says, how is that justice? How can you bring a more evil power to bring judgment on an evil power? That doesn't make sense. And then in chapter 2, verse 1, he says, I take my stand to watch and station myself on the tower and look forth to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. I love that. I'm going to get up on a tower and wait for God to answer so that I can formulate my rebuttal. Well, some folks learned that it doesn't pay to argue with God. Job learned that. Habakkuk's about to learn that. God's answer in verse 2, he says, basically, write this so big that everybody can see it. It's coming. It's coming. And he says, if it seems slow in verse 3, wait. It will come. It will not delay. The answer's coming. Behold, he whose soul is not upright in him shall fail, but the righteous shall live by his faith. In other words, ultimately, God will deliver his people, his faithful people. It may not look like it all the time on this earth, but ultimately, God delivers his faithful people. Wait for it, Habakkuk. Don't rush it. I'll do it in my time, God says, but that will be the outcome. That passage gets quoted in the New Testament, Romans 1 verse 17, the just shall live by faith. It's the passage that Martin Luther struggled with. What does this mean? Until he realized that it means that he who through faith is righteous will live. Until he realized that, he didn't really understand the gospel. Until you and I realize that, we don't understand the gospel either. Our righteousness not comes in what we do or even in who we are, but it comes in the faith that God has placed in our hearts. That's one of the messages of the book of Habakkuk. The book of Habakkuk ends with an interesting psalm. I love the psalm at the end. It's Habakkuk's sort of psalm of trust and resignation in a way. Verses 17, 18, and 19, he says, though the fig tree do not blossom, nor the fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in Yahweh, I will joy in the God of my salvation. God, Yahweh is my strength. He makes my feet like hinds' feet, like deer's feet. He makes me tread upon my high places. In other words, the place may go to pot. The destruction may come. But I've learned one thing, Habakkuk says. I've learned to trust in God. And I've learned that He will elevate me above all of that. Why do bad things happen to good people? Specific reasons, I don't know. But I do know that God elevates us to walk above and to rise above those bad things that happen in our world today and those bad things that happened in Habakkuk's world back in 600 BC.